Assalamu alaikum. While everybody signs on, quick introduction. Today's guest is Shahjahan Chaudhry. We are going to be conducting our live chat session number 21 today with Shahjahan. Shahjahan Chaudhry is the director, NIC Karachi, the National Incubation Center. And it's very interesting because I met Shahjahan in 2012. Had just started, and we were introduced through Sabine Mahmood, who was then the director for today's T2F. T2F was her brainchild, as we all know, and Sabine and Shahjahan were developing an incubation center back in those days. This was their brainchild for a creature called Sparkplug, and Sparkplug, for many obvious reasons, didn't happen. But since then, we have something that is run magnificently by Shahjahan called NIC Karachi. And NIC Karachi was designed in this space that we're sitting in right now. So that was quite fun, and I think it'll be an amazing little conversation to have with him sitting in the office, my office, in fact, where we designed the NIC Karachi for them. So Shahjahan, hi there, here he is. Here he is. I was just doing a quick introduction of you.
Hello. Yeah. How are you?
Good. How's the sound, Shahjahan? How is the audio, video? Is it okay?
Audio was fine before. Now it has gone down a little, but it's fine, I guess.
It'll find its balance. So I will just finish my introduction. Yeah. Folks, whoever here, this is Shahjahan Chaudhry. Shahjahan is an old friend of mine. I've just told you how we met through Sabine. And SJ, it was in 2012, in fact, shortly after I'd started the Cube work, when we'd met in T2F's conference room talking about Sparkplug. Yes. Shahjahan is not only a dear friend, but also an amazing thinker. He's a philosopher. He has the clearest of thoughts on how the world should be. And I think that looking at what he's doing with his digital startup incubation center, we can see these pieces in his mind coming into play. Very, very cool man, and it's a real honor for me to actually introduce you to all the people who are here with us. Shahjahan, the Cube Editors community. Jean Gardner has just signed as well. So hi Jean, good morning to you in Pennsylvania. Shahjahan has kindly agreed to take time out from his hectic schedule. He said to me the other day that he's been extremely productive under quarantine conditions.
Absolutely.
Normal. I can't even imagine. So thank you, SJ. Thank you to you. And I know you've had some kind of a background check on our work. I've shared with you some of our links. You're actually one of the few people who have had an opportunity of experiencing an edu tour. You went with us in this kind of heat, 45 degrees, to Ranikote, to the fort. And as we were talking about it, that having experienced, Jean and I have been developing this content together through the Jugalbandi series about how experiential education is so critical today when third-party education and fake news and the media world and digital world is causing so much noise and confusion amongst the younger generations, that having access to heritage architecture and receiving information from it directly, as opposed to through 3 different books and 4 different professors and 5 different videos, assuming that our entire body is a receptacle for those memories, which you then retain and you recall the heat, the wind, the dust, the texture of the stone, just the majesty of the world's largest fort here in Pakistan. So you carry that with you. The reason I brought you on board to chat with me and help me understand what would be the future of a new educational format, a new pedagogical philosophy using the digital age in a way to connect with those experiential educational models. How do we join the two and be able to share that experience with somebody in Shanghai and New York and Melbourne and Dhaka and Islamabad at the same time? Where do you think one should go? Are we looking at games, gamification? What do you say?
Then I was just thinking about, there was one interaction in 2012 which was about Sparkplug, but I think you are missing another interaction which happened in 2018 when we were thinking of building a city in the mountains.
Yes.
And in a place like Chitral or Shangla or somewhere remote but pleasant.
Yeah.
And the idea was that you need to bring people together because as people, as like-minded and more and large numbers of people come together, they interact and create new things. So innovation is an output of diverse set of people coming together and sharing experiences. And a lot of times, so cities have traditionally been those hotbeds of innovation because they bring people together, people from different regions, and which is also why, for example, countries like the United States have done well because immigrants coming from all over the world to places like New York, and that mixture of ideas um, has um, has helped them do interesting things faster. So the way I see it is that I mean I like you to keep that in mind. A city in the mountains. And then the other thing you just mentioned was that I told you that I've been more productive than usual. I think I've been multiple times more productive than usual, and I'll try to explain that. My work routine was that I would wake up in the morning, whenever, take my time. But then, my office routine would be starting from when I would start getting ready for office, which would take half an hour, breakfast, etc., etc. So 45 minutes to 1 hour of some time spent at home going to office. And then I would actually commute to office, which was another, 40-minute drive in the morning. So that's 40 minutes plus roughly 40, 50 minutes, that time. So that's about 1.5 hour of work that I did, and I hadn't done anything yet. And then in the office, I think, I would settle down for half an hour. So that's another half hour gone. So that's about 2 hours because, you're going from so far away, so you have to settle down. You need time for that. And then in the day, I would have about 2 hours of meetings, which would be either pointless or which would be meetings that I don't want to have. But since I'm available and I'm there, and the other person is also there, so we're having this meeting, which is like a semi-forced engagement, and out of politeness and acceptance of the situation and kindness and generosity and all those things combined. But since you're available, you get involved in those meetings. So another 2 hours gone. So about 4 hours are gone, and we haven't started work yet. Then I would, because I'm at work and I have colleagues, so I would want to spend some time, socializing with them over coffee or sitting here or there. So that's another, hour of socializing in a day because if you have 15, 20 colleagues, so even if you talk to a few of them for 10, 15 minutes each, that's an hour gone. So about 5 hours. So about 5 hours gone, and we haven't started work yet. And then there's the coming back process, which will start about 20 minutes before I leave office, and uh, and then it would take another 40, 50 minutes to get home, so about 1 hour gone. So that's about 6 hours gone in a day. So now, what is available to me to work is about 2.5 hours, and out of that, I think my actual utilization would be less than that because I'll probably reply to some emails, do some random stuff. So probably I'll get 1 hour of real valuable things done that I want to do. And now put me in this lockdown, and I don't have to do any of those things in those 6, 7 hours, and I can just do the 2 hours, and I can have the rest of the day free. Or I could work for 4 hours, and that's 3 or 4 times more work, more actual work being done. And if I have to have a meeting, it's probably going to be online, some Zoom conversation or some other way, and it's going to be pre-scheduled, planned. I will choose whether I want to do it or not. So I'll have 1 or 2 meetings in a day, but they won't be based on, are you available? They'll be based on, no, I'm not available, and do I want to be available for this or not, right? And so I think that sort of sorts the day in a way that I'm much more productive. But when I apply the same thing from myself to my team, I think the same thing is holding true, because they had 1 or 2 hours of productive time, and I've asked them, your work day is like 4 hours. Just try to give 4 hours a day, and they're more productive than they are in office, because in office the main requirement from them was check in and check out. You come to office, you have checked in, and you have checked out in the evening. So everything in between is an add-on. If you do something, that's great. If you don't do anything, I can't really question you, because you didn't do it. So and if you go into too much transparency and accountability, then it becomes like, then motivation goes down, and then people are not taking ownership. But when you're engaged from my team's perspective, when they engage with me digitally, there is no other way to know if you've done something unless you tell me what you've done, right? So some way of you sharing what you've done. So I'm not asking them, when do you start work, when do you finish work. We just talk about, these are the things you're working on, is it done, and that's it. And within that as well, I'm pretty, I've accepted that whatever my level of whatever my expectations are from somebody, I should lower them to like 70-80%. And if they're delivering to that level, they're doing a great job, which really eases my work, because now, by accepting them at my understanding of whatever 100% is, 70%, all of a sudden I'm free to not observe them or help them, or do anything with them, other than, maybe, once a week coaching around, what is an outcome, what is valuable, what is not valuable. So that's, I think, my personal experience. But if I extrapolate from this to, what happens in a university, and what, so we have a partnership with NIC University, which is one of the oldest engineering colleges. And so, for a student who's attending a 1.5 hour, 3 hour lecture and coming to university to do that, out of there are 500 faculty members, and 50 of them are great, 450 are average, and so for him to come to college and come to university and go back is about 2 hours of, coming and going. And then you have a class happening in which he or she has to socialize, connect with other people. There's so many distractions, and so he's probably learning for about 30 minutes in a day. And in order to achieve that 30 minutes of learning, he or she is pretending to herself and himself that they spent the whole day at university, and they were studying, and they were learning something new. And I'm totally okay with socializing and having fun, but I think we can structure it better. That when you're, for example, this conversation that we're having, if you notice, so it's way more focused. I mean, even if you look away, I'll notice that you're looking away. You can't pretend not to be listening, right? Or you can't pretend to be listening. It's harder in a video call, because there's so much focus on this, frame, in which you can see each other so clearly, that in a real environment, if we are sitting in your home even, somebody walking by, your dog doing something would distract us more than, the kind of focus and attention we bring to this conversation. So I think video is also powerful in that way. And then, so if I were to look at both university infrastructure, retail infrastructure, all of these things that we have built, and the city in the mountains that we're talking about that we wanted to build, I think they all become meaningless once you realize that you can connect with way more people, way faster, with a lot more efficiency, than you could in a offline infrastructure, model. So yeah, so now, taking this, idea forward. So one of the things that I've realized is that people are, so we really devalue this. I mean, even in my mind, before these 3 months, I would have said, let's build a city in the mountains. We need more universities. We need to build infrastructure. We need to bring people together. We run a place called National Incubation Center, which you designed with so much love. And so I believed in physical spaces. But I'm beginning to think that all these spaces have to be for fun, for socializing, for getting together, for having dinner. So, I mean, with my colleagues, I should meet them once a week for dinner and not really to work together and to pretend to, get to know them over coffee. So yeah, so it's an interesting time.
So, um, so many fun things you've just mentioned. So, how do you think this is going to affect our? See, Gene and I have been talking about. You've just hit the nail on the head that we should build spaces, real spaces to play, socialize,
Yeah,
get to know each other. Other ways of looking at the term play. So, play for children, play for young adults, play for older adults. Uh,
yeah.
for geriatric adults like myself. And
Mhm.
the term play can have a creative output, which is not
Yeah,
necessarily connected to work or not connected
yeah,
to learning, where you go and do
yeah,
something that's video based. So you've mentioned video a few times. It means obviously the future of learning is video. And if the building of a university is not required for university learning, then how are we learning today in terms of learning from our skin, our brain, and that 1 0? What is that doing to our learning process? Do you have some ideas about that?
so then I know we had a earlier conversation. You mentioned about being able to touch the soil and
Yes.
smell the air and and so on. But if you look at our current state of mind, we're generally not in the present moment.
True.
We are generally not absorbing things the way you would imagine that we or you would want that we absorb things. Most of us are 30% attentive to our surroundings, to what we're doing, to even when we're listening to each other. We're our minds are 30% there and 30% in the next meal we're going to have, the next commitment we have, our past traumas, our future traumas, and so our minds are not really, in in that moment to the degree that they should be, which is why meditation helps and mindfulness helps and so on. But essentially, the idea is that your mind is not in your control. So my experience right now is that if you were to compare how much attention you bring to the table in a video call is generally higher than the attention you bring to a conversation which is happening somewhere else. So even from an attention perspective, let's say that your focus in a real life classroom environment is about 40% on what is being taught, and if and digital, you can also play with a lot of things, and as we evolve this medium more, we'll also figure more things out. But if you just realize that even in this call there is so much zoomed in, everything is blocked out. We're looking at this little screen and trying to yeah, so because of that focus, automatically I think our attention has gone up from a normal 60%, even when we value the other person's opinion, from a normal 60% to maybe 70 or 80%. And which means that our capacity to absorb has also gone up, which means that the only question now is that is the other person bringing any value to the table, and can they if they are to, then the learning will happen faster. And also I think that a lot of times, if and video also has this quality of there's a combination of live and recording and text, and so digital medium can actually deliver value in a non-linear way, which is very customized to you. You yourself are customizing it. You could listen to a talk between Zain and Jean here, and then you could get onto a WhatsApp group where you have some friends talking about the same topic. You could go to YouTube and watch a few TED videos on the same subject. So learning can really be accelerated using this combination of live, recorded, past, future channels and mediums. So yeah.
So would you define this as non-linear education, non-linear learning? What is
So
non-linear?
I think beyond non-linear, one of the things that changes with work from office or to work from home is that you require a lot more self-discipline, because you need to structure your day better in order to be productive. You need to, define your own boundaries. When are you working? When are you not working? Even if it's for like, even if you work for an hour and then not work for an hour. So whatever structure you're involved in, so you need to, in the same way that, for example, on the internet, we can waste hours, you know, opening multiple tabs, going from here to there, and the less, because of the overflow of information, there's this possibility of being distracted a lot, right? And the same holds true for work from office and work from the difference between work from home. So the key change that is required is more self-discipline. And once you bring so I think self-discipline is going to become a key skill, because as you don't have managers and you don't have teachers to the same degree, right? So you don't have a teacher standing in a class making sure that you're paying attention, right? And you're not talking to each other, or eating food, or walking out or walking in, or whatever, right? Or you don't have a manager saying when do you came into office and when do you leave, and how many hours did you have coffee, and so on. So self-discipline is the key. And once you realize that self-discipline is the key, then I think then the next step is, how do you set goals, and then how do you achieve them? So setting, so self once you have self-discipline and you have this structure in which you set goals and you structure yourself, then all of a sudden, from a knowledge transfer perspective, digital and video and online is probably 100 times more powerful than any kind of offline version that you can build. Especially now, when once you've added live video, there's nothing left. So before live video, there was still this missing element that you don't have anybody to ask. You could get stuck on a question, and online would not provide you that answer, and you could spend hours, finding that one small thing. But now, with if you combine all of that information that is available on search engines, and online journals, and video, and every format, and then you combine that with my ability to ask Zain in a 30-minute conversation, in which there are 15 people that he's coaching, can solve those problems as well. So there's nothing left from a offline. So whatever was available offline is also available now online, along with the power of online, which was already practically infinite information available to you in all sorts of formats. So when we say non-linear, and when we combine that with self-discipline, what it basically means is you having self-discipline, you setting goals, and then you moving towards that, and all the resources are available from from lectures from various universities. The best professors in the world have recorded their lectures, and they're available, and more of them are going to be available. Plus these live sessions, plus websites which could go deeper into specific topics like algebra or nuclear fusion, or the history of Runnicott Fort, for example. So you could have one site totally dedicated to exploring what is Runnicott, its inches and square meters and so on, and its mapping and its history, and who could and as a student, I might be taking interest in that topic for that week, and but over time there could be millions of people interested in that particular topic, and that website can serve millions of people. You've built it one time, and it can serve millions of people. So this combination of, I think, self-discipline and non-linear sets all of us free on a new knowledge path, which we can choose when, how, where, to what degree, and once you combine that, as I said, with live video, it's like a killer package,
So,
unbeatable.
is it possible you've now identified all the different forms of nonlinear? You've also
Yeah,
identified how we can all be more productive in less time. So instead, we can
yeah,
be more productive in a 3 hour day than we have been
yeah,
in a. So that's increase in both ends, decrease in
yeah.
time and productivity. So those are two elements. Can we also, do you think, uh, hybrid connect a reconnection with the earth, so that one doesn't assume that just because you can now do 4 hours, 10 hours work in 4 hours, you should do 2 days work in one day. You should still do
Yeah,
4. You do the volume wise, you've still done a full day's work in 4 hours, but the other time is spent playing, discovering, exploring, and maybe reconnecting to the earth, because lack of connection to the earth and empathy of the earth and nature is what's led us to the climate crisis, because we've become so um, egotistical and make it seem like the earth and all of its ecosystems are there to serve our needs, and we should just extract and suck it dry. Maybe this would be a good time to say time out. Actually, the other 4 hours of your day, we could create from the same groups, from the same people already interacting, other forms of learning that's discovery based and exploratory and playful
Yeah.
and triggers the imagination, to say the other 4 hours of this university will be spent reconnecting you to the earth and its geometries and its magnetisms. So if that makes it, yesterday I was watching this amazing film on dolphins and the horrible dolphin massacre that happened and in an off a little town called Taiji in Japan, and the people who've been working on stopping this. The dolphin behavior expert said that these dolphins are, they said, potentially more intelligent than us. But what
Yeah.
makes it, it's not their intelligence that makes them fantastic, it's their self awareness and their consciousness. You said something earlier today about consciousness and ESP, and it made me think about those dolphins, that we actually sell ourselves short in the digital world when actually there's a lot more going on that's intangible in our systems. If you
So
can remember, that'd be great.
yeah.
What
So I think one is that when we talk about efficiency of time, it it doesn't mean you do more. It
mm,
to me it doesn't mean mechanical efficiency that now you can achieve 10x more in the same 8 hour workday. What I mean is that you currently have forget about you me. I had a 9 hour workday in which I was useful, productive, doing meaningful work for 1.5 hours, and now I can work for 3 hours and do twice as much in those 3 hours versus 9 hours, which means that I have 6 hours free. Which means that, for example, previously my workday would start around 8:30, would end around 7ish, and by that time I wouldn't feel like going over to Zen's house and having dinner or having coffee. I'd already exhausted my capacity to talk to people, engage with people, right? Now that I have not wasted all of that energy on meaningless interactions and meaningless stuff, I should apply that. I can now think that I start my day earlier. I can start at 7 in the morning, and by 10 I've already done more than I would do in the whole day, and I can spend the next 4 hours with my family. I can spend the next 2 hours reading a book, and then I can go for a walk, and then in the evening I can plan a dinner with my friends, and while being twice as productive as I was before. And I think which holds true again, same for the university experience that we're talking about, that it doesn't mean that you take away the university experience. What it means is that from a learning perspective, whatever the university was attempting to deliver um, can be delivered in. Can you hear me?
yes, yes, loud and clear. Yes, I can hear you. I can hear
Great.
you.
So, okay, great. So, you were pausing a little bit. Your video was paused. So whatever the university was going to deliver in, half hour, an hour, now I don't have to, do the rest of the process to do it. But in order for the play part, where, you get together with friends, hike on a mountain and you talk about philosophy or, physics or whatever, or you go camping and with the same people that you learn with online, and so it doesn't have to be when we again say linear and non-linear, that also applies to this, that your social group which has the same shared interest doesn't literally have to have all experiences combined, and you can for example have a heritage tour with cube edu tours, but you could be taking an online class with Gene, or and you can be part of a Slack group which is exploring the history of Sindh, and all of that for you as a person, if you have self discipline, if you set the right goals, then all of that will combine together to create a way more richer learning experience than a single track, somebody designing it for you, trying to create an outdoor activity, indoor activity, classroom experience, and so on. So one person designing it for you, and you dependent on a lot of times an average teacher to make sure that you learn something. You are the master of your learning experience and destiny.
So a few days ago, I mean that sounds perfect. I'm going to just throw in another spanner in the works. If we hold on to all of that, we just hold that thought. Now, in
Yeah.
the middle of all of there's a question that in our play, we bring back, I've been talking about a learning environment where craft is connected to technology. We bring back hands from the children, the adults, whatever, all the way. So the play is not just having dinner with me, but now we have time because for dinner with me or coffee with me, you would rush across. Now you have time to actually come a little bit earlier and we could go to the beach and maybe build some sandcastles. Building sandcastles is an amazing craft experience. And then come back and have dinner because work is done, time with family is done. Maybe you had time for a little bit of a workout. So there's potentially all this spare time where we could extend dinner into pre-dinner, go to the beach. It's 2 minutes from my house, 2 minutes from your house, and play
Yeah.
in the build sandcastles, look at the mica. It gives us an opportunity to discuss the urban skyline and what's happening with the beach, and look at the people coming in and out, discuss Marvi's work. Whole new things to discover without ever expecting it, without projecting it, without putting it. So when one says that, the guys that are creating these digital platforms for us, they're, the binary 1-0, they can't ever give us that experience because they're not crafting anything, right? They're not working with their hands, and their 1-0 is just neuron. So what is a neuron? What role do neurons play in all of this?
So, I'll just, because we talked about neurons earlier, I'll just, tell that again.
Yeah.
The human mind is made up of billions of neurons, and individually they're just, sparks and electricity, but together they are creating consciousness. And I think that, when we come to, when we look at our planet, I feel that it's like a hive, and individual human beings are like neurons in that hive, and the hive is becoming self-aware as the neurons are connecting more. So I think previously, um, without all this digital technology, so the hive was limited. It was a village. Then it probably became a city, and then it became relatively larger hive, which was still sort of disconnected. It became a country, but but now, if like right now, if you're having this conversation, there could be 50 people watching from various parts of the world, and it's like me and you as neurons, which are creating sparks, which are connecting to their minds and creating thoughts in their heads, and consciousness is just a sufficient number of neurons willing and capable of interacting with each other. So I think there's a new kind of wisdom which is going to emerge also from these, live video especially is going to play a big role in the next few years in terms of um, connecting us and uplifting us. And I, so one thing that we had a little bit of talk about was that while social networks have connected people, but they've also divided humanity a lot, because they were based on little bits of information and us disagreeing on them and not really having meaningful conversations, because meaningful conversations can't be had with 144 characters, or one photograph with filters and so on. But I think live video is that next evolution in terms of our ability to have meaningful conversations. So so I think the future of social networks is also going to be more positive and productive. And if these social networks don't evolve to that, then new social networks will emerge, which will create those learning societies where the way I see learning societies, and again, I'll come back to the city in the mountains, is that the idea of the city in the mountains was to bring people together to create a hub for knowledge and learning and sharing. And now you don't have to physically get together, and you can have millions of people from all over the world coming together and learning and sharing and collaborating, and they can multiply that base of knowledge much faster than we could do in a physical environment, because physical environment also has this limitation. You know, how many people can you house, how many people can sleep there, how many people can walk around, how do you provide sewage and lights, and I don't know, so many limitations. And then how many people would actually be willing to fly over there? But in this conversation, anyone can join from anywhere in the world. And I think the next challenge for humanity is going to be that we have a couple of billion people who are not connected. One, the couple of billion people who are connected may not have the quality of connections that me and you have right now, and people who are listening to this have. And then and there's many people who may have access to that connection but may not be able to afford that connection. So if you have a family of 5 7 people and you have a single internet connection, and it costs you $20 a month, so you can't have seven, maybe they can't afford 7 connections, and they have to ration that. And how do you go beyond that? So once we have taken care of these things, then I feel that using again uh, the I think the equal element would be the printing press, which is that before the printing press, we had these libraries, the Library of Alexandria and the library in Baghdad, and other cities, and you would have very few well-read people who would then teach very few people who would come from all over the world. So very special and very committed people would have access to that knowledge, and books were valued extremely highly, and they were taken as most sacred. And then came the printing press, which sort of the same book, which was probably you had 50 copies of, now you had 5 million copies of, and they were available all over the world. And especially the parts of the world where they were more available, progressed faster. So Europe adopted printing press, and it sort of democratized knowledge. And instead of being concentrated in Rome and Alexandria and Baghdad, it was now in every city and town and village. And I think the same thing is going to happen now, that like universities like Parsons, where you went, and or Stanford, or Harvard, or in places in Switzerland and Sweden and China, all of these have limitations. They're like the Library of Alexandria, where very few people, for some, for infrastructure reasons, for the way you deliver education, for all of these, they have limitations. They can't serve 3 billion or 5 billion or 7 billion people. And but what video is going to do is the same thing as the printing press did, which is that university is going to become like the Library of Alexandria, uh, pointless in terms of creating the future, not pointless, but not as meaningful. And video will play the same role that books played previously. And video is, just imagine reading a book is still a monologue. Somebody has written that book and you're reading it. But now you have access to TED talks, you have access to Stanford lectures, you have access to all the writings from since forever, and you have PDF copies of them. You can read it. You have podcasts. You can listen to them. And if you package all of that, and then you can have live sessions with great people like you, where you can pinpoint issues and help people fix themselves, instead of them having to only solve it themselves. Now you can also, there's a human intervention as well. So when you combine all of this, we can have a world university with 7 billion students, and instead of fighting with each other, we can be discovering the universe.
So that's amazing. I love the sound of that. So this singular global university, which I would say, SJ, that I'm not sure about the term meaningful, that they're not as useful or meaningful because they're sitting in their geographic architectural hubs. But I think this process can make the university experience more accessible. So if
Yeah,
there are 10,000 students that have the luxury and the privilege to a curated education, because the information is still the same. I am not creating information, and the information that any university degree is offering anybody is information
yeah,
that's been in their archives. It's data. It's third
yeah,
party. They're not people who are writing it right there and then hot off the press and releasing it to
yeah,
the students. And the students traditionally are not participating in their or contributing in their education. Now we have the opportunity for environments like what you and I have now, where people are live, hot, getting the info. They're part of a discussion. We don't have to agree on everything. So they're actually also seeing the disagreements, the discourse, the pitfalls of it, the boring bits, the interesting bits. And actually, that dynamism can be an egalitarian global educational university, which basically gives access to this kind of curation of good quality education to everybody. So they can afford
Yeah.
it. This does involve, there's no cost of accommodation, of flights, of paying for life in euros or US dollars or yen or whatever. They pay, they live in their homes, they live in their own cities. But as part of their education, they have also been put into that curriculum time for play, time for discovery, time for
Yeah.
research, time for. So there is a holistic balance. I read someplace yesterday that we keep talking about balance, but it's not about balance, it's about wholesome. And of course, it's about wholesome, but the yin yang balance has to be there before you create the whole. Right? You can't have a whole from disharmony. First, you create the harmony,
Yeah.
then the whole that connects the human to universal geometries, to Mother Nature and Earth geometries. And for me, that human is architectural heritage because those buildings, those forms, carry so much information in them about society, philosophy, spirituality, materiality, the earth, what was available there, what was imported, who could build it, the craft, the craftsman, the tools. There's so much information that the politics, the trade, the monetization, the financial investment, who are these people, power, control, strength, and governance. Right? So the one
Yeah.
fear that always has with getting into the digital world and say, okay, here we can create modular systems that are governance free and control free and can manage their own systems internally by giving them modular, if this then that, like the binaries one zeros. But
Yeah.
then you're worried about singularity and worried about the digital world taking over, especially places like us, right, where we have one step
So
ahead for nonlinear backgrounds.
yeah. So one of my favorite authors is his name is Clay Shirky, Clayshirky, Clay Shirky, and he's written about groups and online communities and how they behave. And so one of the things he wrote is about why groups over time. So they first become useful, they go up, and they become more meaningful. But over time, they start going down because the same structures and parameters that help them evolve help them crash as well.
Right.
And what I mean to say by that is that if we have a global learning society, if all of humanity is participating in that experiment, then moderation is obviously the key to taking it forward. And I think the word I wanted to use was, I mean, the word I used was incorrect. Actually, from a organizational perspective, I think universities are the most meaningful organizations because they are, I mean, if I were to compare it to corporations or you know um, uh, city governments or national governments and so many other types of or non-profits and so on. So if I were to pick one organization which can take humanity forward is universities, because universities are in the business of lifting up humanity and giving them a vision and translating wisdom from one generation to the next generation and curating that in a way which has structure and progress instead of chaos and disorganization. So universities have a key role to play in organizing this global learning ecosystem, and their brand can play a role, their internal infrastructure can play a role, their past history and culture can play a role. All of that can play a role. I just want to talk about one more thing, which is that there is this conversation around automation and artificial intelligence and how it's going to create joblessness, and we won't have anything to do, and how will people pay for their mortgages and cars and food and so on if there are no jobs. Like, so if all the truck drivers are going to be out of jobs, then what will they do? So I think that that's a very unfair conversation. It's almost like, me insisting that if I don't get up in the morning and don't get dressed and don't drive, don't have a commute to office and don't waste my time talking to 2 hours to, random meaningless, having random meaningless conversations, then I don't have a job. It essentially means that I've saved 6 8 hours of my day, which I can put to some other better use. Hiking, meeting friends, play, going to the beach and making sandcastles, and so on. Which holds true not just for me, it holds true for all of humanity. If we don't have to do all the things we're doing right now, to move things in trucks from here to there, if we don't have to do the same things we're doing right now to, I don't know, fix electricity wires, or to cook food, uh, or clean up, or clean cities, and so on. If robots are going to be doing that, that is incredible. That means that all of us are now free to be artists and scientists and philosophers and astronauts and, football players and hikers and skiers and whatever we want to do. So, and to create, and in that society, I think, we will obviously not want McDonald's to run that society or Coca-Cola to run that society. We would want universities to run that society, because if universities are running that society, then they will create meaningful experiences for us, and they would do it in a way that, so, we again, we keep talking about basic income. I think basic income is a flawed concept. We don't have to give people something for nothing. We can ask people to, be part of a university experience, give the university 10 hours of learning, teaching, and the rest of the week they can do whatever else they want to do, and they can get paid for that. So, the idea that once there will be joblessness, then we have to give free money, and who's going to bring, where's that money going to come from, is absurd. The only thing that we need to ask is that, how are we going to structure a society that capital does not get concentrated in a few hands, and because even if it gets concentrated, it's just going to destroy society. Because, if nobody has the money to buy the things that your, robot factories are making, then you're not going to sell anything. If you're not going to sell anything, why have those factories in the first place? So it's basically, we need robots to make food, transport things, and we need people to create art, to do science, to explore the universe. Yeah.
So that sounds gorgeous. Now, did you say that we still have to go and build a university in Shangla? Because that's still stuck in my head. We still need a giant play center, right? A place where
Yeah.
the those of us who are in administration or mechanics creating that curriculum could still go there to play and
Yeah.
have come out as its overspill with the play being a curriculum. So एक तो ये बात है, because that's in my, we should still do it. The other
Yeah.
thing is,
For fun, not because it's needed.
yes, yeah, is that if we look at ancient cultures, and by ancient I really mean Indus Valley civilization, 6,000 years old, Mesopotamia, 5,000, Egypt, 4,000. Do you think that there are things that they did which we call the cradle of civilization? Do you think that looking at this region of Asia, that we have the knowledge, historical, cultural knowledge in our genes that has come through our youth today, just genetic, cultural, genetic knowledge and wisdom from our ancestors, that we could actually be, could we generate all of this from here, or do we have to keep going back somewhere else to get the ideas and the content? Can we do it here, do you think, from
So,
here?
so, so, the way I would frame this is that I see myself as a global citizen, and I see the history of humanity as my history, the heritage that we
Right.
collectively have around the world as my heritage. And I think what you're talking about has more to do with not with connecting with our ancestors or their ancestors. it's more about finding self-belief in yourself wherever you are from,
Right.
and self-awareness and self-belief, which means that not so respecting yourself and your history and culture, and it's a responsibility. So, for example, if I was born in a Buddhist family, so my responsibility would have been to uphold those traditions to some level, right? Along with becoming a global citizen and connecting with humanity, to delve deep into those that history and that culture. If I was Chinese, I would have done that. If I belong to in the Indus Valley ecosystem, then it's my responsibility in the same way that it's somebody else's responsibility in their own place, right? So all of us humans are coming from different places, and it's the same place, but there's also diversity. So all of us have to bring our own selves to the table, right? So I can't bring a Mexican to the table, right? I don't have a choice. I don't come from that heritage and that background and that history. I come from from a genetic perspective, from a mental frame of mind perspective, from the stories that have been told to me perspective, in every perspective. So it's my responsibility to one to discover this and to respect it,
Yes.
um, and bring it forward. And it's also my responsibility to share the wealth of knowledge that my culture and my whatever land I belong to comes from. It's almost like having a mother tongue, right? So if a mother has spoken to you in a certain language, no matter what else you learn and no matter who you become, that sort of stays with you. In the same way, the culture that you've were born in and brought up in, you have a responsibility to that culture. So I might have a responsibility to the whole of humanity and the planet, but my first responsibility is to my village, to my family, then to my village, then to my city, then to my country, and then to my continent, and then to my planet. And so from that perspective, I think the and what you're mentioning is has more to do with, since this part of the world is right now not the most progressive and not ahead of the curve. So we need to probably pay more attention and bring it out more. The work that you've been doing around going around discovering places, sharing information about them, because in for example Rome or UK, they have already done more research around their own culture and history, and Scandinavians have discovered more about Vikings, and the Chinese know about their history. So from that perspective, let's put it this way, that we haven't given our culture and our history enough respect, and you're doing that, and all of us need to do more of that. But it doesn't. I don't see our culture being special in the sense that I think every culture is special in its own way. Our culture needs a little more emphasis because we have discarded it or ignored it and haven't had that kind of belief that we need to have.
It's actually not just our culture. I was referring more to the ancient, the absolutely ancient three cultures. One is Mesopotamia and Sumeria, the three cultures that are often referred to as the cradle of civilization. Then where does one begin?
Yeah.
Last week talked to us about indigenous peoples. Like, what can we learn from those that are from that land, that haven't arrived there, they haven't migrated there, they're not immigrants, they're actually indigenous cultures. So whether it's the Native Americans or the Eskimo or the Aborigines in Australia, or whatever our indigenous would be. And we ended up talking about that we don't have an indigenous, because if you go back to the Indus Valley civilization and see what's happened since then, what we need to celebrate in terms of acknowledgement of country, which is what they do in Australia, is the acknowledgement of diversity. And I think that acknowledgement of diversity for us is really important, because that way we're not trying to, what you said, be careful of, not trying to impose a lack of self-knowledge of nationalism onto somebody else, but you're actually taking a point in time that has so many different people involved in it. It gives you your global citizen feel, because from Portugal to Japan, all of this region has been moving up and down, back and forth for 4,000, 5,000 years.
Yeah.
So the point is not that far from where we live, in fact, and it would be a great place to say, okay, if everything is converged here and given us this non-Puritan, non-purist, collage of colorful history, then why not look at what can come out from here? I mean, maybe it's not been documented, like you said, not done the research, not checked it out, but there is enough evidence to say that between Egypt and Sumeria and the Indus Valley civilization, there was a wisdom of ancient people, 6,000 years old. And of course, there were people that were living before that. But these are the earliest documentation we have of life, city, egalitarian governance, games, play, um, systems of learning that one can learn from. And it would be a good point in time to begin using all three and their relationship through the Silk Route. And then we can go north and you can go east or west or south and spread radially out whichever way we want to go to get, like you said, get information from different people and repackage. Instead of just saying, let's look at what the Brits have given us. Let's look at what the post 1492 Americans have given us. Let's look at, because that's all very, very modern. If we were to shed those skins and go beyond that, let's go back into the eras, let's go back into Chinese philosophy.
So,
the I Ching, could there be things put together for tomorrow coming from that far? I guess that's what my question.
so yeah, so I mean, I think one is I think it's always valuable to, for example, read fiction, because it's almost like living through an experience through somebody else's words. And the more fiction you read, is like, the more lives you've lived. I mean, you can only live one life, but if you're reading fiction, you're living multiple lives. I think the same holds true for culture and history and different traditions, whether they're religious traditions or whether they are histories of specific regions and so on. And you can accumulate information from all sources. It's almost like if you want to see what's happening in the world, and if you understand what happened in Rome, when it was going up and down, or what happened in Arabia, or what happened in Sumeria at a different time, and what happened in Egypt. So the more it's almost again like fiction, right? So you have multiple stories and narratives, and that bring together and create a vision. But I think what's more important is that bringing together all of that information is about building the foundation for the grand future that you want to imagine for humanity. And as an entrepreneur, I like to work backwards, which is that all of collecting all of this information is just to help you carve a future vision. And then once you have created a grand vision for humanity somewhere 100 years from now, and then you work backwards and you say, what do we need to do now to start going towards that? And in a very non-linear fashion, you try to contribute the best you can wherever you are in whatever you're doing, at whatever life stage situation you're in. And if sufficient number of people, one, have general consensus, not specific, but general consensus on this is the kind of society that we want to live in. So, for example, and a lot of how we live in our countries and our cultures is based on the stories that we tell ourselves about what is important and what is not important, about even from an economics perspective, about communism being about communes and people coming together and collectively owning things, or capitalism being about capital being the supreme good, and its growth being important, and so on. So all these narratives. So I feel that going forward, one of the key things is that so there's an idea around for example, in economics right now we talk about gross domestic GDP, right? Gross domestic productivity product, right? GDP and the growth of the GDP and so on. I feel that if we were to shift that to what I like to call gross planetary well-being, and in planetary you include people and planet, and then you start measuring yourself, because once you start measuring something, you start doing it. And we start doing, for example, the way we plan our cities, does it improve well-being for people or not? So let's say, from a holistic perspective, having cities with cars is a terrible idea, because you can't move all those people around in cars, and so on. So looking at ideas from the perspective of, are they good for people and planet or not?
Okay, Shahjahan, I'm so sorry to cut you off. We have 25 seconds left. And I think that this would be a conversation I will come back and bug you about in terms of turning all of this into your next startup initiative for us and help us
Yeah.
generate. But God bless you. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We will speak again soon. Take care, Shahjahan. Thank you. Khuda
Thank
Hafiz.
you. Bye bye. Take
Bye.
care.